Liam, you've said to me a few times about wanting to know when winter will end. And I finally figured it out, mate. On February the 2nd, all you've got to do is go to a little town called Punxsutawney, to a nice little corner called Gobbler's Knob. And there's a little groundhog there that will tell you, he will speak in groundhogese, and he will tell you whether we get 6 more weeks of winter or not. Welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast. We're your hosts, Liam and Wes. How are you doing, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, you.
And if you hadn't guessed it from that really strange intro, we covered Groundhog Day.
Yeah, first 90s movie. Although you actually thought it was an 80s movie, didn't you? Which I find absolutely bizarre.
The earlier part of my life, let's say, that I honestly thought it was an 80s movie. It feels 80s to me.
No, you can't. Anything with Andy McDowell is 90s, dude. Even in films she made in the 2000s, I see Andy McDowell, I was like, that's a 90s movie. That's a 90s movie. It's like everything about her screams the 90s. And more so, I mean, the suits, man. The suits are so 90s in this film. It's unbelievable.
I was young.
You were young. You were naive.
It was Bill Murray.
It was, yeah, I see like Bill Murray at that point, he still looks like Ghostbusters Bill Murray.
Yeah.
He still has that 80s look about him kind of thing. It was only, I guess, like very late in the 90s, early 2000s that he shifted into his more melancholic. I know there's a lot of melancholic attitude to this film, but he's still got his foot in that kind of still that Saturday Night Live kind of thing. You know, he's still energetic. He's still the kind of, you know, what I consider as phase one Bill Murray before he moved on to.
If you look at this, it's not as comedic as previous films, or even as comedic as you think it would be. It's set a lot in drama. It's repeating the day, and it's a weird one because it has its moments. Like the opening, actually, what for the first, I'd say 20, 30 minutes, and certainly before the whole Groundhog premise sets in, what Phil reminds me of very much is Frank Cross from Scrooged, which is very much an 80s movie. He's got that same vibe, the same energy. And in some ways, I mean, obviously structurally it's different, but it's the same kind of movie. You know, he's a complete asshole, and it's not even like a subtle, he's a complete douchebag. But the whole film is about him learning his lessons. And, you know, with the whole Scrooge thing, you know, it's following the traditional ghost structure. And then, of course he learns lessons. In this, it's a bit more subtle. And one of the things I loved about the film was his journey, because the whole film really is his journey through his multitude of phases that he goes through, you know, throughout this film. You know, obviously you've got the love interest, Andy McDowell, and some people could call this, you know, a romantic comedy. But I really think the romance is there just to serve that journey. I don't think of it as an Andy McDowell movie at all. I think of it very much as a Bill Murray movie, and that her actions are there to serve his narrative, if that makes sense. And I think I'm saying that because I want to be able to forgive some of the stranger choices when it comes to Rita's character. There's some pretty weird shit with her, but obviously we'll get to that at some point. Yeah. So you said narrative, right? And I know we'll get into Rita and stuff as we go on. But when you say narrative, I'm just trying to think how to word this now. Yeah. So the way it is. Sorry, I got it in my head and I can't actually get the words out. It was written.
It's great for a podcast, of course.
Oh, absolutely. It was written. Fantastic. It was written differently. It was actually written to start off. Bill Murray's already
in the loop.
In the loop, yeah. And Harold Ramis was going to keep that, but then he decided no. He promised the writer that he would keep the loop, but then he took that out, and that's why you got Bill Murray starting the day. But the narrative changes if Bill Murray's already in the loop, like, because you don't know about his character.
Yeah, that's why I think they added it. You know, eventually you needed to establish his character before you jumped in, because that's the difference. You know, an obvious comparison is the recently released Palm Springs with Andy Samberg, which I think is an absolutely exceptional film. But that film jumps in with him already there, and it is interesting, especially as I went into the film not knowing a great deal. That idea that you're already in the loop, but what essentially anchors the film, there's the word I'm looking for, is the girl who comes in. And of course, she's taking it from that perspective of not knowing. So he's explaining it to her. So you need that other character who's aware of the loop, who's, you know, constant in the loop, so that the narrative works. Whereas if you just drop him into this loop and you've not established the character beforehand, of course, everyone just keeps reacting to him that same way over and over again. So I think it made, I can see why they wanted it, because it is quite a dramatic start. And as I said, in Palm Springs, it actually worked. But because, again, to go back to my earlier point, the narrative is solely structured around him. It's all gearing towards him. Every character's actions and purposes, it is all leading towards his, eventual retribution, I suppose, is the point, isn't it?
You said it. The narrative works in Palm Springs because you've got that introductory character. You've got the girl, and we're doing a disservice by not remembering her name. But
yeah, really am. But I cannot remember her name for the life of me.
But you've got that character, and she's the audience's way in. And what I really liked about the idea with Groundhog Day is there is no audience way in. You've just got to pick it up.
Well, you're dealing with it,
figure
with
out
him.
What's going on. And I kind of think that if they would have kept it as the original script, would it have been? I think I might have liked it a bit better than. Don't get me wrong, I love this film anyway, but I think I might have liked it a bit more. But I don't think it would have been as good for audiences.
Yeah, I was going to say that exact thing. I don't think it's going to have the broad appeal that it does. And the thing is, that is one of the things, I mean, Bill Murray wanted to make this a darker, more philosophical film. Yeah. And of course, there are hints of that throughout this. And it's one of the reasons it's had such a long legacy, is that you can just watch it, enjoy it for what it is. But if you want to dig a little deeper, which obviously over the, 28 years, whatever it is, since its original release, people really have. I mean, there are so many different readings of this film. But fundamentally, when you go back to it and watching it again, I was like, oh yeah, you can just enjoy this as a silly, you can just see it as a rom-com if you want to. But what it does is all those different ideas, the depth of the film, it actually sneaks up on you, because obviously you chose this film this week and it's one you grew up with and obviously have a great fondness for. I've seen it like twice in my life and I remember liking it, but I don't remember a great deal about it. I remember most of it, the finer details. And when I was watching it again recently, I remember for the first 20, 30 minutes, I was like, man, am I going to like this as much as I thought I would? Because I know it's absolutely beloved. And for 20, 30 minutes, it does play that quite broad comedy, romantic build-up kind of card. But it's only as you get into it and you go on that journey with Bill Murray and it gets weirder and weirder and weirder. And you notice those layers, which are under the surface, but they're very much there, that you're like, oh, this is the reason this film's so special. This is the reason why, rather than just watching it and being like, oh, that's good, and then forgetting about it, people are still talking about it 20, 30 years later, and people still love it to this day.
But Bill Murray is the anchor point of this film.
Oh, 100%.
So
100%.
The reason why you say you love this film, you grew up watching this film, is not so much for the film itself. It's Bill Murray's portrayal in this film. Like, he is the actual... he's the star of it. He's going to be the anchor point.
Oh, 100%.
What I'm saying is, if it was anyone other than Bill Murray, I don't think it would have worked. Not thinking of 90s actors now, like early 80s. Like, you chuck comedians like Chevy Chase in there, any actor like that. I don't.
The only one I thought who could, and the thing is, obviously, people have different opinions on him. But in terms of being able to go from that kind of manic energy at the start, or the fact that he's just an asshole.
Are you going to say John Belushi?
No, I was actually going to say Robin Williams. Because Robin Williams has that in him where, he can be larger than life, super comedic, but you've seen films like Good Will Hunting. Yeah. When he turns on the dramatics, I mean, I would say he's actually a better actor than Bill Murray. And when he turns it on, you're totally in on that. And, that's not to discredit Bill Murray, because that is one of the things with this film. It's like, I totally went on this journey with him. Yeah. And by the end, I totally bought into the idea of him, turning around. It didn't feel cheap. As I said, to go back to the whole Scrooge thing, that feels so structured. Oh, he has to see the ghost. He has this journey he goes on. He kind of goes back and forth quite a bit. It's not just he's an asshole gradually becoming nice. He tries nice. He's still a bit of an asshole. He goes back and forth. I mean, I've written down the phases here that I noticed that he goes through. So you come into the film, obviously he's just confused at first. Yeah. He very surprisingly quickly becomes accepting of his situation. By like the third day, he's pretty wild out there. He's getting the guys in the car. Richter Common shows up yet again.
I was going to mention Richter Common, but wouldn't you though?
Well, that is one of the things I was going to ask you. Is like how soon before you're freaked out, and two, how quickly do you just go like, well, I'm just getting on with this now?
I'm sorry.
It's a possible question, of course, but
if you if you wake up on the third day and it's still the same day, you realize that you're stuck somewhere. So you're like in a time loop, or however you're going to say it. So
you do realize we've seen far too many movies where after like 2 days, you're just like, yeah, this is a classic time loop situation. No freak out moments or anything like that. No going to the neurologist like he did to see
Harold Ramis.
Harold Ramis. I was going to say Egon. No, straight to you just sit there.
But the first day,
I'm pretty sure this is a time loop.
The first day you wake up, the second day, should we say, you wake up and you start getting that deja vu, and then the third day, that was one of the best lines. Did you catch that line? I don't know the lady's name, the one who owns the bed and breakfast. Do you ever have deja vu? And she said, I'm not sure. I could check with the kitchen.
That's a pretty good line, actually.
That is the best line. That is awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Sorry, carry on.
No, I was going to say, on day 3, I think that's when I'd start testing. Not so much going straight to killing myself or things like that, but I would start testing things to see. Because he tried it, didn't he? With the when he had Rick the Common in the car and he decided to take out the mailbox and stuff.
Quite extreme, the whole getting arrested. It looks like at one point they're just going to drive into the train. I'm not saying I wouldn't be testing things, but I might do, at the end of the day, it might be the end of the second day when he breaks the pencil. It's a really simple trick, but a really clever one. Yeah. And obviously he wakes up and the pencil's fixed and he knows something's up. I'm not sure if I go straight to these kind of slightly suicidal actions, to be honest.
I'm not going grand larceny or anything like that. You're starting off small.
Well, he doesn't, though. He jumps pretty quickly at some pretty wild actions.
But again, that's what Bill Murray does really well, because he's still doing it with his face doesn't change. You said about Robin Williams. I think Robin Williams is a fantastic actor. And yes, in certain circumstances, he's probably better than Bill Murray in the roles that he takes.
But dramatic roles, I think.
Yeah, but I think he'd be too manic. Robin Williams could go manic or serious, but there wasn't much in between. The fact that Bill Murray is so straight-faced in this film, and all these things are happening around him, and it's just like they're bouncing off him. Do you know what I mean? Sorry, you had a couple more phases anyway.
I got tons. So, he was confused. Then he was straight, I still think, oddly accepting. Then he had his brief bonkers phase where I can only assume they had it so they could dress him as a cowboy. The Call Me Bronco scene, that was quite bizarre. So that was brief, but he had the bonkers scene. Then he had the whole search for love scene where you think he's trying to do the right thing, but he keeps fucking up because he's trying too hard. And the point is, I suppose, he's not being honest. After that, he gets depressed. Then he gets into his angry phase. Then he goes into his suicide phase, which I thought was interesting because there didn't seem to actually be any genuine attempt to break the cycle. Like in a lot of these films, they'll start looking, it's like, oh, how can I break this cycle? He just goes straight into, well, I've tried, getting with this girl. I'm a bit angry now, so I'm just going to start killing myself. So I guess, I'm not sure how many times he did try and kill himself, or he did kill himself and just was reborn on the same day. I'm not sure if they said. But he did mention the fact that
he said he was electrocuted, stabbed,
frozen. I'm not sure how that works.
He jumped off the building. We saw that when he jumped off the building.
Yeah, he said he was burned. He said he was hung. Oh, Jesus Christ, man. So, So after that period, he goes into the I'm a god / deity phase, which makes sense. Then he turns into his super sweet and adorable phase, which doesn't last all that long. But then he goes into he starts moving forward then naturally into the whole, all right, I'm going to be the best I can be, I'm going to be a nicer person. But that still feels separate from his next phase, which I saw as the altruistic phase. That's when he's going around, he's saving the old man, saves the kid out the tree, the bit with the tire. The bit with the old man, actually, it was oddly touching. I thought it was going to be longer. Because that bit was really quite touching, where he kept trying to save the old man from dying. But it didn't feel like it went as far as it should have, that scene.
But he was really good as well. Like the realization in his face when it was sometimes people just die.
Yeah. He totally sells those moments.
He finally accepted that, unfortunately, he's tried everything, but it's just too late for this man.
Yeah. It's like no matter what he does as part of this loop, he's just going to die. So I think that kind of leads into him trying to save everyone else. And obviously, he does have that whole thing where he's going around, he saves the mayor from choking, he saves the kid out the tree. And then that kind of leads into the whole, he's almost accepting of his position in the town and then leads on to eventual genuine happiness.
Well, he is the fastest Jack in the West, mind.
Oh, of course. Yeah, there is that.
Do you know who the mayor is?
Yeah, I've seen him in a whole bunch of things, but I cannot remember his name. I did have it written down. But
it's his older brother.
Is that really his older brother?
It's Bill Murray's older brother.
I had no idea that was his older brother.
Yeah.
Doesn't look anything like him.
I don't know if he was the mayor or he was the Grand Marshal of Punxsutawney. But
the guy
Brian
you
Doyle
from
Murray.
Choking. Oh shit! I actually looked his name. I just didn't even consider that could be his brother.
Brian Doyle Murray. Yeah, that's his brother.
Very odd. Very odd.
And he has been in so much.
Oh yeah. Like he's one of those he is one of those guys. Is in you see him like I know that guy. He's been in a ton of things. And then someone now you go, oh, what has he been in? And I'm like,
random. He was in Scrooged.
Yeah, he was in Scrooged. Yeah.
As his father.
See, of course. When you start saying them, yeah, he was. And he's only a few years older than him, isn't he?
Yeah, because, he played his father when Frank Cross was 8 or 9 or something, wasn't he? So he was the butcher that brings in meat and goes, I got a present for you, a choo-choo train? No.
Oh, yeah.
It's 8 pounds of ground chuck or wherever it was.
Jesus, I just can't believe that's his brother.
Yeah.
So weird. But I guess that is the thing. I mean, the whole film revolves around him, but for him to work, obviously the love interest with Rita, you have to go on that journey. And I got to be honest, she's another one, like last week with Booth. I totally had a crush on Andy McDowell when I was younger, and specifically Rita from this film.
I'm starting to see a pattern, to be fair.
Yeah, I think it is pretty clear, isn't it? But oddly, I was watching it, and for a long time, she's an absolute douchebag. It's you sell her at the start and she's all cute and nice, but the more you spend, it's in that early phase, when the search for love phase, as I call it, when he's constantly going on the dates with her. And of course, it's all to do with the fact that her actions need to, again, drive the narrative, which all leads back to Bill Murray. But some of the stuff, beyond the fact that she dresses like a fucking lunatic and she's got a really, really bizarre accent. I can't even tell where the hell she's from. But she quotes poetry. Fucking give me a break. Her expectations for men in that scene are off the wall. What'd she say? It's he's got to be hot, he's got to be smart, he's got to be nice, he's got to play the harp, he's got to be a professional sportsman, but I don't have to tell anyone. I think he should probably be 6'2", speaks at least 7 languages, and always brings me to climax. Fucking give it a break, love. And what's the other thing she does? I always drink to world peace.
Yeah, I always drink to world peace. Come on.
Come on now. If I met a girl and she said, I drink to world peace, I'm like, oh, great, I'm out. Yeah. But, she's a douche. But even her, throughout the film, as he falls in love with her, I think you do too. I certainly did. By the end of the film, I was totally smitten with her. Totally. And that was after really disliking her for a spell earlier in the film.
Well, it's different because you get the search for love scene and then you get the one where he's being honest with her and she spends the day with him and then she starts to warm to him. And as she starts to warm to him, you start to warm to her.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But in that search for love scene, he went absolutely insane when they started throwing snowballs. So for the second time we saw it, but for him, it must have been the 100th.
Yeah.
When he's going, you little scamps, and they're throwing at him, he's going, let's get him. I want kids. I want all the kids in the world. And it's just you could tell at this point, he's just so...
He's lost perspective at that point.
He's lost the plot. He just doesn't... No,
he
wants to see now if he can get Rita, basically. And it goes back to that Palm Springs where the girl we're so doing her a disservice. But she asks Andy Samberg.
I've seen her in anything else.
She was the only thing I've seen her in, really. She was the mother in How I Met Your Mother.
Oh, I never watched that either. I'm going to find out her name.
I just know she was.
Kristen Milotti. She played Sarah.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Okay, so she says to Andy Samberg...
She was really good in that film, by the way.
She says to Andy Samberg, have you ever slept with anyone in this time loop? And he says, yes, a couple of times, but it's a lot of work. And you go back to Groundhog Day and you can clearly see it in Bill Murray's face. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, you see that.
Okay, Nancy.
She's a lot of work, but Nancy is an easy layman. He just says, he's calling her Rita, and she's like, what the fuck? He's like, oh, no, I love you, I want to marry you. As soon as she hears that, she just forgives it. He calls her Rita again after that, and she's like, oh, okay, and she just goes with it. So just be clear, you've got the two extremes. Rita is the trickiest lay of all time. Although the whole point is she's not actually, and if he was just honest and nice, then it makes her a nice person. That's the whole point. But when it's, when he's trying too hard, then the way she kind of reacts to him feels unnatural. So and maybe that was planned, the reason it works so well. But yeah, Nancy, Jesus Christ.
That made me laugh.
Keen as fuck.
That made me laugh. When he's walking Rita around the cafe and says, oh, this is Nancy. She went to so-and-so high school, and she makes noises like a chipmunk when she's excited.
Yeah.
Well, you do.
You do. It all comes back to that question again, which the numbers I've heard are pretty all over the place in terms of how long Bill Murray is actually in the time loop.
Yeah.
Because let's not forget, this movie starts, there's no explanation for the time loop. They don't explain, like most of these other films, the films that come after it, films like Palm Springs, obviously we've already mentioned, Edge of Tomorrow, a film that I love, Source Code, all of those films explain away the time loop to one extent or another. This film, you come in, there's no explanation for the time loop, and when he leaves the time loop at the end, spoiler alert, there's no explanation for that either. You're just kind of vaguely left with the idea. It's like, is it because he's become a better person or he's genuinely fallen in love? Maybe, but there's no explanation for it.
I like that, though.
I love it. I love it.
I like the fact that it's down to audience's guesses, and no audience will ever guess it because there's no reason for the time loop. It's literally, let's just make a film about a time loop. We don't even have to explain how he's stuck in a time loop. We don't have to go into the science of it. Let's just have him repeat the day over and over again. Happy days.
Yeah. The weird thing is, this is maybe, I'm sure there are other examples, but when most people think of time loop movies, this really is the first one, and certainly the one that popularized it. And the weird thing is I'm like, oh, well, of course he's on a time loop because it's Groundhog Day. And you're like, no, this is a chicken and egg situation. We'll only think of it as Groundhog Day because of the movie. There was what was, like, the only term we had for it before this, you would say deja vu day. Like, we call it Groundhog Day because that's what the movie's called. Groundhog Day is a completely different thing to a day being on repeat.
Yeah, this movie popularized deja vu.
It popularized as well the incorrect use of a naming convention. We go around now and say, it's like I said, the perfect movie for our times because we all, maybe we're coming out of it now, but for the last year or so, we do all feel like it's been a bit of a Groundhog Day. We've all been stuck in every day. We're going around in the same process, doing the same things every day. But that is the thing. We say Groundhog Day, but Groundhog Day is the day that Puxatawny Phil comes out and reads the weather.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with the time loop. We've just stolen it and said, oh, we're just going to use this for all time loop situations now. It's a Groundhog Day situation. But Groundhog Day is a completely separate thing. So it's quite bizarre how we've stolen that naming convention, even if it does make sense.
Let's talk about some of the things in the film, because you've just said they talk to the groundhog. That's one of the things that's weird in this film, and I already covered it in my intro. At 7:20 and 2 seconds, or whatever it is, Phil in Groundhogese told me about that he saw a shadow. I saw 6 more weeks of winter. Like, so basically, Buster, that was his name, wasn't it? Buster, the mayor, the grand poobah of Gobbler's Knob.
Gobbler's Knob, Jesus Christ. Were they not aware of that? Is that right? I just got to ask. Sorry, I know you're in the middle of a point.
I'm a child. I laugh every time.
Are people in America aware that it sounds so rude? Because when I think of knob, I think it's a very British term. Yep. So I'm not sure when they're saying gobbler's knob in America, if people are snickering like we are. Like, gobbling knob, I mean, Jesus Christ. It's quite... I mean, you could say, oh, it's like sucking cock. But sucking cock doesn't paint as horrendous a picture as gobbler's knob. Like, oh, no, she was gobbling knob. It's like, oh, really? God damn, she's nasty as hell. So, yeah, sorry. But I just wonder if they hear it in America and it's funny there as well, or it just sounds cute.
You got to think, it's got to be an innocent thing. But for us...
I think it probably is. Filth.
I giggle like a schoolboy every time.
Well, that is the thing. I go through that phase. I giggle, and then I start thinking about what it really represents. And I'm like, it's one of those aggressive, deep blowjobs. Like, oh, fucking gross, dude. I don't want that in this film.
We have really fallen down a rabbit hole again.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, sorry, I've completely derailed you with sloppy blowjobs.
Let's pull this plane back up, and we'll exit Gobbler's Knob for a minute.
Yes, true that.
But is Buster just deciding then what the weather's going to be?
Yeah, like for, what is it, the next 6 weeks?
6 weeks.
Or...
So if you see the shadow, it's 6 more weeks of winter.
Yeah. So I guess it's like going into spring, it's like, like we've had, it's like, oh, is it going to be that nice sunny start to spring, or is it going to be shitty weather as we've had?
And
so yeah, the thing is it that big a deal? I don't know. I mean, maybe to farmers back in the day, it was a bigger deal, but I'm sure as it is now, it's just a tourist attraction.
Larry, the cameraman, as well, is a serial killer.
Oh, Woogie's definitely a serial killer. With that jumper and that look, like, I don't think that character. What's his name?
Larry.
No, his real name.
Chris Elliott.
Chris Elliott, yeah. I don't think he can play anything other than serial killers. He just, maybe it's because of something about Mary that I just think, oh, he's always a psycho. And as I say, he has one of the best lines of the film when it's like, Rita asks him when they chase out, after Phil's stolen the groundhog.
Yeah.
She's like, why would anyone steal a groundhog? It's like, I can probably think of a couple of reasons. Pervert. It's like, wait, is he suggesting, just for no apparent reason, that Phil is stealing the groundhog to fuck it? I mean, it's a really weird line in the film, to be honest. But yeah, he's a total psycho.
Everything in this film, and I actually like shuddered when they walk in at the end and he's dancing to Phil playing the piano, and he puts his hand over Nancy. And
it's creepy.
Yes, you get the shot, the sideshow Bob.
Yeah. And that bit, and there's something of the night about him. You know, like when obviously it's the big build-up and Phil's doing all of his good deeds, and they're at the dance, and he gets purchased by Rita for like $300 and something, and then he goes up, and the way he stands there and presents himself is I'm surprised the old woman paid 25 cents for him, to be honest, because he is creepy as shit in that scene.
I do love that Bill Murray, or Phil, is worth $339.88.
Whatever's in your pocket, man. I mean, at that point, I would have taken him home. That is the thing. And again, it comes back to the Bill Murray performance. Like, that move to him becoming genuinely altruistic, a genuinely good person, I'm totally on board for it. And as I said, going back to this movie, I really wasn't sure for the first 20 minutes. And then it just layered, and that performance just becomes better and better. You know, the start is classic Bill Murray. Yeah. But by the end, I'm like, I'm fucking in love. I'm in love with Bill Murray. And as I said, because of their relationship feeling more natural at that point, I'm in love with Rita. There's a scene at the end when they're just laying in bed together. Rita's sleeping, and I just looked over and I was like, God, she looks like my wife sleeping there. I was like, I totally fell in love with her. And I love her bouncy hair. Oh, Jesus Christ. There's something about nice 80s, 90s girls. I don't know what it is.
Also, is it still a little bit creepy if you're just staring at your wife sleeping?
Well, no. I mean, I've been with my wife for... what is it, 17 years? I've seen her sleeping a few times. I am not, just to be clear, a sleep starer. And I told my wife the same thing, because I've seen Paranormal Activity. I'm not sure if you remember that film. But there's a scene when they're watching back the tape, and in the night, his wife just gets out of bed, and it's like on fast forward, and she just stands there at the edge of the bed staring at him for like 3 hours. I said to Bethan, straight up, I was like, if I wake up in the middle of the night and you're just standing over the bed staring at me, I'm coming out swinging. There's going to be punches thrown. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm just going to come out. The first thing I'm coming at you with is fists. It's going to get violent real quick. So don't try this whole, watching me while I sleep. But yes, I want to put that on record. I do not watch my wife sleep, but I am aware of what she looks like when she does sleep.
Okay, glad we covered that. Now it's
yeah, me too. Because I don't want people walking away thinking, "Oh my God, Liam's a fucking psycho," or more of a psycho than he
already is.
Yeah, totally.
Harold Ramis directed it.
Mm-hmm.
And he played the neurosurgeon who referred him to a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
That psychiatrist having one of, again, the best lines in the film.
Which is?
Well, Bill Murray's talking to the psychiatrist and says to him, like, didn't you go to school for this? And the psychiatrist just turns around and goes, yes, I have an alcoholic now as well. I do it disservice, that line, but I pissed myself.
If we were more organized and more technically astute, it's one of those things where we could say it and then we could like put the clip in for people to listen to.
Yes.
But we're not, just to be clear to anyone listening, that's not going to go happening. So you'll have to rewatch it and find out for yourself. But yeah, Harold Ramis directed this, and he's got a weird... I mean, I love Harold Ramis, obviously from Ghostbusters in particular. I think everyone, associates him with that. But he did direct quite a few pretty big films, but it's a real mixed bag. I mean, the ones I picked out are the kind of ones I was most aware of. So there's National Lampoon Vacation, which I love, the first one, the Wally World one.
Yep.
That's a great film.
Well, I've already mentioned Chevy Chase in this, yeah.
Yeah, so that was fantastic. Multiplicity, which also almost feels a little bit similar to this in terms of like that high concept kind of romantic comedy. Analyze This and That. I think he did both of them.
The Robert De Niro, Billy Crystal thing. He did
Yeah. He did those. He did Bedazzled.
Bedazzled,
which isn't a great film, but my God, that is peak Liz Hurley. She is so fucking hot in that film.
Liz Hurley really enjoyed wearing those costumes. I really enjoyed Liz Hurley wearing those costumes, shall I say?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a creep or anything, but if I watch that film, I find like she is distractingly hot. And maybe it's easier for her to be distractingly hot in a resolutely average film, you know.
I don't know if you're going to cover. You've missed the quintessential. His very first film he directed.
What was that?
Caddyshack.
Oh, see, I should have put Caddyshack. I've got a separate note for that because he directed Caddyshack, and I know it's beloved, and I fucking hate it. I hate Caddyshack.
Really?
Oh, I can't stand it. I try. The thing is, I don't. Again, a perfect example for this podcast. The whole thing with this podcast is we go back and watch these films and like, do they hold up? And would you encourage others to watch it? And I had a friend who's a few years, because it was pretty early in the 80s, Caddyshack.
It was 1980.
Yeah, well, it completely passed me by. And a friend of mine's a few years older than me, he'd said, "Oh, dude, you've got to watch Caddyshack." So I was like, "All right, I'm gonna finally give it a go." I did not like it at all. Bill Murray's character is just annoying as shit. The comedy didn't land for me at all. Maybe you know what it's like with comedy. Sometimes you can just be in the wrong mood and it just doesn't work for you. But yeah, I agree. It wasn't like oh yeah, this is disappointing. I aggressively dislike Caddyshack.
Next week on Hey You Guys, Rob and Liam cover Caddyshack.
That'll be an interesting chat. Well, the other one to bookend it, I suppose, with another terrible film, because there's a lot, you know, decent stuff in the middle. But Year One was hot garbage as well.
Jack Black and Michael Cera.
Yeah, that was shit.
Awful.
That is really bad.
To end your directorial career on that is not good.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, it doesn't matter because he'll never be associated with those. He'll be associated with this, an all-time classic, with National Lampoons, which I genuinely think is an all-time classic comedy.
Yeah.
And of course, Ghostbusters. So Harold Ramis's legacy is absolutely fine, regardless of Year One and, well, my opinion on Caddyshack.
He didn't actually do much as well, did he? If you think about it.
No, he didn't do a huge amount. But, you know,
not even directed. He didn't act in a huge amount either.
No. Excuse me. It's like when I think of Harold Ramis, I'm like, well, he's in Ghostbusters, he's in Stripes, and then like I can't think of much else. I'm sure he was in a lot more than that, but there's not much which jumps out.
No, there's not much that he was in. Like I'm looking at his filmography now, and acting wise, no, there's not much. Like he's written quite a lot.
Well, that is the thing, though. Like, and I think that's what makes him more memorable is that you only have the good stuff. It's like the weird thing with Bill Murray is that you have these ups and downs, you know, and the same with some, like Robin Williams is a perfect example of these incredible highs and these incredible lows. Yeah. Whereas with Harold Ramis, it's like, oh yeah, you just remember him from Stripes and you remember him from Ghostbusters. And if you're going to remember somebody from two films, those are two pretty fucking awesome films.
They're two great films. This is his filmography, right? This is the ones he acted in. Stripes, Heavy Metal, Space Hunter, The Forbidden Zone, National Lampoon's Vacation, Ghostbusters, Baby Boom, Stealing Home, Ghostbusters 2, Groundhog Day, Airheads, Love Affair, As Good as It Gets, High Fidelity, Orange County, I'm With Lucy, The Last Kiss, Knocked Up, Walk Hard, and Year One. So, all right, I went on for a little bit then, but all in all, that's what, like 10 films for a guy whose career stretched from the 70s to...
Yeah, it's a weird. I mean, in fairness, he was never as popular as Bill Murray. I mean, even back in the 80s when it was like Stripes and Ghostbusters, for example. I mean, obviously, Harold Ramis was a relatively big star, but even in those films, the star was Bill Murray, and that goes right back to his, Saturday Night Live days. You get these certain guys like Bill Murray, like Eddie Murphy, like Will Ferrell later, or Adam Sandler in the 90s. These guys who, you look back at the cast and go, God, there's a lot of famous names on there, but they were the guy or the girl kind of thing, and there was a reason that they were pushed to the forefront, that they got the big roles. And even something like Ghostbusters, where you think, oh, there's all of their names on the front of that poster, but it's like, we all know who the star is.
But yeah, I agree with you, because when I think of Harold Ramis, I associated him with Egon, with Groundhog Day, and with Stripes. Basically the only things I associate him with. So I think he's a great actor, but yeah, you're right. He's not the one that pushed forward, should we say. That was definitely Bill Murray.
Yeah, but like you said, he did a bit of everything though. He had like a couple of like iconic roles, and on top of that, he's made some genuinely iconic movies. And as I said, it's like, let's make it clear, Groundhog Day is iconic as fuck. Like there are a few films which are loved as much commercially as they are critically as this film. And let's be like, when it was released, it did okay. It did pretty well commercially, and I think it did pretty well critically. But in the years since it's been released, its reputation has grown tenfold.
Yeah.
Like, you see this on lists of best movies ever now. I'm not saying it's top 10, but I reckon if you did top 100 films, a lot of people would be putting Groundhog Day in that, in that very esteemed kind of company.
But the high end of the budget was 30 million and the box office was 105 million. So
and how much do you think this is made on DVD,
TV
definitely. Deals and shit like that? This is one of those films, kind of like Shawshank Redemption, where it's certain channels, certain movie channels, I'll just have this on repeat for years. Like, how much money has fucking Hot Fuzz made from ITV2? Billions at this point.
This goes back to me thinking it was an 80s film, because I wouldn't put this in the same year, sort of the same year as Shawshank, because Shawshank was released in 94. Mm-hmm. Cliffhanger and Jurassic Park were released in 93, along with this.
Well, I guess
this is why it doesn't feel like a 90s film to me.
I know what you mean. But to me, it feels more 90s, but for the same reason, oddly. Like, I know what you mean. It doesn't feel the same year as those films, but Shawshank and Jurassic Park, to me, feel oddly timeless. Like, they don't feel like 90s films to me. They just feel like classic films. I don't associate them. Obviously, if I think about it, I'm like, of course, I know Jurassic Park and Shawshank were released in the 90s. But I don't associate
Shawshank
them.
is a period piece. It's 60s.
Yeah. I don't call those 90s films. I just think of them as great movies.
Yeah. Whereas
this film, because of the clothes, because of Bill Murray, because of, again, going back to Andy McDowell, I personally think of this as a quintessential 90s film.
Yeah.
I really do. But, like I said, it depends on when you watched it in your life, all these, there's a million and one factors. But I'm surprised the suits didn't get you, dude. I'm still a little surprised.
I was young.
You were young. You're fine. Don't worry about it, dude.
I've worn one suit in my life.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough. Hopefully it wasn't the same suit of these fucking idiots, but we'll let you
saw that. You saw it. It was that suit at my wedding. That was it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, obviously this film, it has that real melancholic spirit to it, that, emotional heart. It does work as a rom-com. It does work as a more traditional comedy. But one of the things it does have is an amazing cast of additional characters, those side characters who all make an impact. Of course, they keep getting, repeated. Obviously, you're seeing them in slightly different ways in those performances of it's the same as yesterday, but slightly different. And even amongst a host of brilliant characters, I mean, does this film have the best supporting character of all time in Ned? I think it might be. I mean, he has the best intro, the super annoying, hey, Phil Connor. And you just, in terms of the physical embodiment of just repetition slowly driving you insane, you're like, of all the days, why did it have to be the day when fucking Ned showed up? This fucking ass band. I mean, it's no surprise. You think, in most films, you might have Bill Murray punching Ned towards the end of the film when he's at, his wit's end. I think he punches him on the third day.
I think it's the third time he meets him, he punches him. But I love, because he's there going zing every time he gets a question right. Zing again! Zing. And then watch out for that first step. It's a doozy. You couldn't have asked for a better actor to play him than Steven Tobolowsky, though. Because that guy,
he knocks out the park.
That guy is just... His face is just annoying in a nice way, because I love Steven Tobolowsky.
No, he walks that line between
his voice
being
as well.
Completely watchable and utterly infuriating.
Yeah.
And he actually, did you notice at the end of the film, again, when Bill Murray's, being nice to everyone and he buys all the insurance and he's telling Rita about it, at the end of it, he meows. He 100% meows. Yeah. And I was just, I never noticed that before. He's talking and he goes, meow. And I'm like, what the fuck was that?
Because he was hinting at those two together, wasn't he? He talked about them being together and he just went, meow. And oh my God, mate, that's just...
It was just the way he did it was very strange. Yeah. But and just to be clear, the bit, obviously, one of the things he keeps doing, especially at the start, is he keeps stepping in the puddle.
Yeah.
That puddle... before, I remember thinking, come on, man, that puddle's 1.5 foot deep. His whole leg goes in. Those don't exist. They do exist. I did step into one. And honestly, I thought I was falling out of a fucking plane. It was similar weather. It was up in Edinburgh and it was a bit of snow, a bit of ice. And I walked off the pavement and it is obviously iced over. And this goddamn pothole in the floor was legitimately 1.5 feet deep. And at one point, I was convinced I wasn't stepping into a hole. I was like, I'm free falling. I'm free falling into the center of the earth. This is how it all ends. And of course, all it was like 1.5 feet. But honestly, it came all the way to my knee. I was like, where did this hole in the fucking earth suddenly come from? So they do exist.
Did you pull a Vicar of Dibley at that point? Just fell in.
I might as well. The thing is, I'm not going to lie, I was pretty shocked. Like, for what I was, what would I refer to as? Genuinely startled. We'll say that. It's not.
I got it written down in my notes. Literally just, I would punch Ned as well.
Oh, everyone would punch Ned. That is one of the questions. Like, there are certain things in the film, like we said before, about like how quickly would you go insane? How quickly would you work it out? Like, I'd like to think I'd probably start smoking a little bit earlier than he did. It took him a while. I'd be on the bus. There's like second day, I'm like, wait, we're in a time loop situation. All right, give me a pack of 20. I'm getting back on the cigarettes. But the other one is like, how quickly would you punch Ned? And then before you go into like suicide mode, surely you would have a kill Ned phase. That was the only thing that was missing. Where you're like, I'm just going to murder Ned every single day. Set
him up in like some Saw-related traps just to see how he
gets on. Well, maybe in the darker cut of this film, there's like a 20-minute period when it's just Phil coming up with elaborate ways to murder Ned. And then was like, oh, this is kind of fun and disturbing. But it just goes on for like 3 minutes too long. Just when you're like, oh, this is still funny. It's like, oh my God, this is getting pretty gross now.
Some of the other supporting characters we mentioned, like the very first time we did this podcast, I mentioned Mary Ellen Trainor, and she will constantly pop up as we go through. I'm starting to see now Rick the Common won't go away.
He doesn't go away at all.
No,
he's in every film we're doing at the moment. It's bizarre
because we had him in Die Hard, we had him in The Burbs, then we had a break, and now he's back again in Groundhog Day.
He's back again. Although I was a little surprised. I think you mentioned it last week actually, but I totally forgot Michael Shannon was in this. I wouldn't say a fresh face Michael Shannon, because I don't think Michael Shannon was ever fresh faced. I mean, his face literally, even from when he was in his teens, which I assume he is, looks like an ancient riverbed. There's too much going on there for him to be fresh faced, but he's certainly young.
Yeah. But Michael Shannon, he looks 45 in this, mind.
Yeah, he does. He looks, and the whole film has that vibe. Maybe it's the whole small town thing, is that he looks like a kid, a quote unquote kid from like the 50s. You know, when they were already had 1 foot in being grown up. You know, that kid was already on the way. I mean, other than the fact that he lost his shit when he found out Phil had gotten WrestleMania tickets, which is a fucking dope present, by the way. That is I wish I'd had that as a fucking wedding present. To WrestleMania.
Only if they were going for their honeymoon, because after he gave Andy McDowell a hug, his new wife wasn't happy.
No, that's a good point.
And I wrote that down as well. Thank you for convincing her to go through with it. Like, if you have to be convinced to go through with your wedding, there's something wrong.
I guess some people could say they have just the traditional cold feet. It's nothing about them. It's just the idea of committing, maybe. But instead, they may have just led him to a life of misery. But like I said, they set him off on the right path. I think if any wedding or any marriage, starts with WrestleMania, I think it probably gives them mathematically a 30% better chance of going to go in the distance.
He was fucking 19 in this film.
Michael Shannon?
Yes. 19.
Yeah, he looked about 42. But like I said, he's always looked old. He's just one of those guys. But yeah, he's one of those guys. I think there's a small group of actors who I think just universally make movies better. Like, as soon as I see him, it's almost like a little seal of approval. I'm like, I'll watch this just because he's in it. Yeah. And Michael Shannon's one of those dudes. I'm like, if Michael Shannon's in it, I want to see it. He's great in most things. But there's great casts. Obviously, we know how the movie ends. It ends up happy, but with them getting together and them essentially walking off to spend what you'd assume is their life together. But again, there's no explanation at the end of it. But since then, there have been a lot of rumors about the film, should we say, and a lot of theories linked to the film, and a lot of them are actually linked to religion. I actually think the out of the ones I read, the one I bought into most was that the idea, because a lot of people think, oh, this is like a metaphor for Christianity or a metaphor for Buddhism, which is, that one makes sense because they've got the whole theory of rebirth or samsara, I think it's called. Obviously, there's a direct link into the idea of Groundhog Day. But I thought the metaphor for Judaism was probably the best, because that's all built on the idea that good deeds beget more good deeds.
Yeah.
And that's what I think this film ultimately pushes you towards. It's like all the way through, he's trying all these different things. He's trying to make himself happy. You know, he gets depressed, or, you know, he's trying to find different ways of living this new life in this time loop. But the one that eventually works for him, the one that truly makes him happy, is the altruistic one. It's like he does good things for these people he's constantly seeing every day. And you've got to assume that he's doing it every day, that this isn't the first time he saved the kid out of the tree. I mean, he even says it in the film. So that, and, you know, once you get past all the layers and you get past the narrative, really, I think the underlying story of this film is that, you know, do good for others and good will come to you. So I actually think, you know, the whole Judaism thing works pretty well.
The day's over now. He goes on to the next day. He's not going to get a repeat. He's not going to get a repeat.
No, but he's a better person because of it, though. He's chosen to do the right thing.
I did like the hint at the end that he might not be a better person.
What was that?
When he tells her we should move here, and then he gives her a hug, and then he goes, maybe we'll rent first. So the hint being that maybe they won't get on. Maybe he's not going to like the place anymore. Maybe, you know, there's a lot.
I read it as the latter, I suppose. But I just thought, like, that when I heard that line, because I remember it, like, it's standing out for me as well. But I thought it was more the idea that, yeah, he's become a better person, but the pilot light hasn't gone out on his character, his fundamental character. He's still a wisecrack. He's probably still a bit of an asshole, but fundamentally, he's become a good person because of this. And that feeds into one of the other theories. And again, it's one of the more obvious ones, but the idea that Punxsutawney is actually purgatory. So something's happened to him, and it's basically his actions will determine whether he goes to heaven or whether he goes to hell. Or maybe it's just the idea that you've got to earn your place in heaven, I suppose. And his idea of heaven is, you know, going off with Rita at the end of the film.
That's what this film does so well, because it hasn't explained the time loop, because it hasn't explained why he's in it, what he needs to do to get out, anything like that. It could have been that he did good deeds and that's why he's out, but it could have been just a fluke. That
could be, yeah.
So that's what I like. It's just, you've got all these people now looking into, you got people looking deep into, like you just said, Judaism, things like that. You got just getting a load of links and maybe putting them onto a film that probably doesn't even need links like this. It's just, it's letting people,
I agree.
It's letting people interpret it. Yeah, it's letting people interpret it the way they want to see it, which I think, as you say, is really interesting.
No, I agree. The only other film, and of course, because of the director, there's more of an argument for it actually being there. We think of something like The Shining, where you can take it as just a straight-up horror film, or you can take a bajillion and one different readings of the film. And obviously, this end is at the other end of this movie's at the other end of the spectrum in terms of tone. But because there's always these little hints, there's always just enough for you. Like, if you have a theory, there's enough for you to grab onto. And of course, what makes those theories work is fundamentally, the film has to be brilliant. There's a reason people are still talking about theories about The Shining, and there's a reason people are still talking about theories about Groundhog Day, and it's because they're both, in their own rights, absolutely fantastic films. If fundamentally they weren't great movies in the first place, these theories wouldn't come up. The only reason these theories come up is because people have seen The Shining a bajillion times. They've seen Groundhog Day a bajillion times. So every time you watch it, you see something a bit different. And it's one of the things I'm convinced that the bartender might be God. The black bartender, there's just a few too many scenes of them cutting to him. And he's got that, and again, this might be a slightly, I don't want to say racist stereotype, but, you know, an old-fashioned stereotype of the old black whimsical character. You know, he just kind of knows a little bit too much and stuff. It's almost a bit of an old-fashioned trope, I suppose.
There's a lot of films where you've got the menial worker, say, who is the guy that changes something for you. There's I can't think of the film. It was a James Belushi film with Michael Caine, where James Belushi wanted to live his life differently.
I almost did my Michael Caine impression then. I'm reining it in.
If James Belushi wanted, if he would have married somebody else, what his life would have been like, and Michael Caine lets him live that life. There was a Nicolas Cage film, I think it was Family Man, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Where Don Cheadle lets him live his life. And Don Cheadle just played, I think he was a robber at that point, but then he was a petrol station attendant and things, and he was testing people as well. I appreciate what you're saying about the bartender, and it could be that the bartender is somebody just letting Phil live a life to see that he is a complete asshole and he can change his ways. Even if he makes little changes, he can change his ways for the better.
Well, he gets there. He gets there eventually. I just thought, because the thing is, I totally see what you mean about those characters, but usually they're more prevalent. And I just keep thinking, oh, maybe there's like additional scenes, or maybe they were going to go in a certain way. Because I just think there's certain looks from that bartender where I think he's going to play a more pivotal role, but he never does. I just think there's something about him. I just totally do.
Again, that's what I love about this film: the fact that there's no hint to why it's happening.
Yeah, totally.
So we're having this discussion now because there's no hint, there's no storyline. Groundhog Day is just happening, just deal with it, kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Just live.
Well, that's why you end up with these crazy theories. And again, to play with the idea that the bartender's God, like one of the darker theories is that after the first day, when he goes back, obviously they try and leave Puxatawny to go back to, where are they from? Pittsburgh. And of course, the road's closed, and he goes back to the hotel. And there's the bit in the shower when he turns on the shower and it's freezing cold, and he's like pulling the shower curtain. One of the theories is that because he's quite cold, he's had a few drinks, he actually slips, cracks his head on the side of the bath. And the rest of the film is essentially he's died, but the concept is that after you die, your brain is still active for a certain amount of time. So in those few seconds that his brain is still active, it's essentially replaying the last day of his life, the thing that he, the most recent thing in his life. And almost like your life flashes before your eyes, but instead it's just that one day constantly repeated.
Yeah.
So I guess that is quite a dark theory, that he is in fact just, bleeding out on the bathroom floor, and this all happens in the space of 10 seconds, but feels like, 300 years or something like that.
The time theory as well.
That's all over the place.
Like, for him to, one of the theories is for him to learn to just play the piano alone, that takes up to 10 years. So there's 10 years.
It's 10,000 hours is the general rule of thumb. Like, I think that came from the Beatles playing in Germany, is that to get to the level that they were when they essentially started playing on all those shows, is that they put in their 10,000 hours in Germany in live shows. So now it's just taken as just this random number now. For anything, for you to get great at piano, for you to become a great ice sculpturist, whatever, it takes 10,000 hours.
But I love it because somebody asked, like, a lot of people probably asked Harold Ramis, like, how long does it, how many years? And he probably just got sick of it. So he just came up with different answers each time. Like, it takes 10 years to learn the piano.
That was the first one, yeah.
He's lived it like 1,000 years to do everything, like to learn everybody's names and everything like that. It's all over the shop. You never know. But
the only ones
have been doing it for years.
Well, because that was the thing. At first, he said 10 years, but then I think people took him to task on that because, of course, he probably didn't think too much about it, which again leads to that theory that maybe as much thought wasn't put into this as, everybody wants to believe. So he said 10 years. Bev was like, dude, that just doesn't add up. So eventually he was like, no, that doesn't make sense. It's probably more like 30 or 40. Now, based on what we mentioned previously about the 10,000 hours to master skills, I'm not sure if it was a site or a few people, whatever, they basically took the mathematical approach to this in terms of the information that we're provided in the film, combined with the idea that it takes 10,000 hours to master these skills. They've come up with the idea that he would have been there for at least 12,495 days. So that is 34 years and 3 months. And that, for me, feels about right, because it's one of those things. I mean, obviously, he's not going to forget his job because he keeps getting reminded each day. But I like the fact in Palm Springs, there are those little hints that it's like he can't remember what his life was now before that time loop, whereas he still feels relatively attached, kind of thing. Obviously, he has his moments going back and forth. But I'm like, when you hear some people say, oh, he's been there for 10,000, I don't buy the fact that he's been there that long. I think he would have gone insane. But 34 years to learn those skills, to kind of, really get a grasp of every single person, every inch of that time. It's like, so I'm going to stick with that. I'm happy with the 34 years and 3 months.
34 years, yeah. Did you recognize the man in the hall?
Probably. Oh, the guy he sees at the start.
Yeah.
Like the first person when he leaves his room, yeah?
The one that says, do you think we're going to have an early spring?
Yeah. I see. I'm building this up like I know who he is. No, I don't.
So his name is Ken Hudson Campbell. He's been in quite a few things, but the two main things that people would recognize him from, he was Max in Armageddon.
In who?
Max, the big guy, the driver,
yeah. Sorry, I got you.
And he was Santa Claus in Home Alone, the one that gives him a Tic Tac or a Pez.
That's a great little. That is actually a great little part.
Yeah.
Like in terms of just having a small role but doing a lot with it. Like you get these people, and that is the same. another great example of this film. Like, he has like a handful of scenes, but he leaves a lasting impression.
He was always, I always remember him from, and I probably not a lot of people are going to know this film, Down Periscope with Kelsey Grammer.
I do know Down Periscope with Kelsey Grammer. Of course I do.
He was the cook, the one that...
see, I can't remember. I've seen that film, but I've seen it once, which I'm not going to lie.
It's the one where they're trying to hide from another submarine, and he ends up farting and sets off the sonar.
See, that's the difference between me and you. It's like, yeah, I've seen Down Periscope, but you've obviously seen it a couple of times, should we say?
Once.
Oh, you've obviously just got a better memory than me.
Well, in certain circumstances, remembering people farting on screen, probably, yeah.
Sure. Well, that's what my wife always said. Not about the farting thing, but she always says to me, "It's like you forget stuff all the time, but like random movie quotes and shit from films. She's like, I never remember that, and you seem to have them on tap."
My wife says the same thing. Like the one thing my wife
useless stuff.
The one thing my wife says to me that I can 90% give you the right year a film was released.
Yeah, I'm usually pretty good, except for this film, funny enough, which you're absolutely useless. That's a terrible example.
Hang on. I said 90%.
Oh, okay, so this is in the 10%.
Yeah, this is in the 10%.
So 90% of the time, you're bang on. The other 10%, you're fucking miles off. Did you see that film, Terminator 2? I think it was released in like
Am I miles off mine? Am I miles off? Because I said 80s. It could have been 89.
Yeah, but this film feels so 90s. It's
so
fucking 90s.
It does.
Oh, it does. It does. It's the night. It's
right.
so 90s.
We could
it makes my ass hurt. Yeah, let's forget
before we move on to facts, have you got anything else you want to cover?
No, let's get to facts. Let's do it.
Well, as usual, then I'll let you go first. You got any facts you want to?
I just thought it was interesting because you already mentioned it earlier about the fact that the movie was originally, I mean, we mentioned the fact that it was going to be darker, that it was going to start with him already in the time loop. But one of the other things, which I thought was really interesting, that they actually thought about an alternate ending for this film. And it was that at the end of the film, when he finally, gets on with Rita and stuff like that, and they wake up the next morning, he's all happy because Rita's there, but Rita just gets up and bounces. And the idea is that the time loop for him is on February the 2nd, but then the movie shifts to a time loop on February the 3rd for Rita. So she gets up and just leaves straight away. And it's another one of those things which makes me think, did Palm Springs steal this? Because it's got the same start with Andy Samberg already in the loop. Yeah. And then, even though it's not at the end, her character, of course, slight spoiler here, so, earmuffs if you don't want to hear about it, but her character keeps waking up in bed with another man. So it's actually quite similar to this, that idea that Rita just keeps waking up every morning. She's next to Bill Murray, but she's then in a time loop. And to explain, I mean, I think we said earlier, the idea that, how would you explain his position and his character? Well, they were actually going to do voiceover. And the idea was that all through the film, you've been getting voiceover from Bill Murray. And then all of a sudden at the end of the film, the voiceover moves to Andy McDowell. And then it has that just suggestion that she's caught in a time loop on February the 3rd. So, and then it ends there, which is like, that's dark as fuck, dude. Dark as fuck.
That's a really good ending. That would be interesting.
Yeah, it really would. Yeah. It really would. But I'm still glad they went with the happy ending.
You were on about an ending. The beginning of the film was filmed after the film was shot.
Really?
Yeah. So the film was meant to start with them actually in Punxsutawney, not doing a time loop. Just them just in Punxsutawney.
Yeah.
But they wanted to show the audience why Phil keeps going there and where he's from and his kind of character. So they did that little weather scene and stuff. And
which is bizarre because I don't think I've ever seen anybody be the weatherman and then just walk straight into becoming the host of the show, the anchor.
Yeah, that's right. Because I thought it was like he's the co-anchor at that point.
Yeah. It's quite bizarre. Like his position in the company is everyone seems to be making fun of him, but at the same time, he's also got a dude putting on his coat for him, which I always think is like the action of a prince or a king. The idea that you have somebody who works for you, who is putting on your coat for you like a fucking butler. So it's like, his whole position with that news agent is all over the shop as far as I'm concerned.
Classic Bill Murray style as well. He ad-libbed to Ned, I don't know where you're headed, but can you call in sick whilst he's squeezing him?
And he calls that's a great moment.
Yeah.
That's super creepy the way this is. Awesome. Well, there's that, and what's the other one I've got? The big one about this film is the fact that Howard Ramis and Bill Murray didn't talk for like 20 years after this film.
just before his death, they actually became friends.
Yeah. Because well, there's like a few reasons. I mean, one was again the idea that Bill Murray wanted this to be a very different film, and the fact that for the longest time he actually hated this film. But a big part of that was supposedly Bill Murray was a complete asshole on set. Like, he was constantly late. He was really rude to all the other members of the crew and the other actors in the film, to the point where Howard Ramis had to step in and like say, dude, you've got to stop being such an asshole. And he was such a dick making this film that Howard Ramis just like didn't want to deal with him again. And there's one rumor, I'm not sure if this is true, but it sounds a little bit like Bill Murray and his antics. But of course, there's the whole legend of Bill Murray, isn't there? So you never know whether to believe these things. Is that because he wouldn't answer anyone's calls, the cast and crew insisted that he got a PA. They were like, we need someone we can talk to get you to be in places, to do stuff, whatever. So he actually hired a deaf-mute PA who could only speak in sign language, which nobody on the cast and crew could speak, and also he couldn't speak either. So he's just being a complete douchebag in the end. Kind of funny, actually, if you went to those lengths. But and again, for me, at least, it plays into this whole idea. There's this like legend of Bill Murray, but also this hint that he might also be a bit of an asshole. And it's like, I haven't quite decided what he is, to be honest. I mean, that's not for me to say, of course, but I don't think he's necessarily the nicest guy.
He did the kind of thing on Ghostbusters as well, because they wrote Ghostbusters. They wrote Venkman for John Belushi. And then when John Belushi died, they asked Bill Murray to do it. Bill Murray said yes, but that was months before filming. So they kept sending him the date of filming. Bill Murray never got back to him. So when they were actually due to start filming Bill Murray scenes, that morning, they still didn't know whether he was actually signed on for the film. Only when he showed up and said, okay, yeah, let's get on with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he is famously elusive, but I think there's that other question of like, is he cool elusive or is he just a fucking asshole?
I think he's just an asshole.
I think he might be an asshole. I'd still like to go for a beer with him, but I think he might be an asshole.
You said about Andie MacDowell, you didn't know what her accent was.
It's all over the shop.
Apparently, it's her accent.
She sounds weird as shit in this film.
She asked Harold Ramis if she could speak with her normal and rather heavy North Carolinian accent.
Is that what that accent is?
Apparently.
Yeah, I couldn't. To see it's all over the place. It wasn't like it was shifting around. It was just that I just couldn't place it. I was like, I know it's like vaguely Southern, but I was like, it's a weird accent. And what I wasn't familiar with at all. But, oh, God, excuse me. But obviously it's because North Carolina. And the only thing I know about North Carolina is Michael Jordan and the college basketball team. That's about it. So, and now, of course, I know the accent thanks to Andie MacDowell and the fact that it's quite mental.
I don't have really any more fact. We've already covered quite a lot, like Bill Murray.
We've already covered quite a lot. And the thing is, this section is usually when we go through soundtrack. But the problem with this film is the soundtrack is complete ass. That is, like, as good as this film is, the film actually starts with two terrible songs.
I like the first song, Weatherman.
I hate them both. Like, there's that weird opening sequence with the clouds, and it feels almost like a Disney film. I just don't think it suits the film. Then there's the clip, and I will give you the Weatherman song is okay, but coming so close after, I mean, it's essentially two opening credit songs. It's quite bizarre, and I gotta be honest, I didn't like any of them. And the whole, the score is fine, in so much that it's not too obtrusive, but you think about some of the classics we've had with the other films we've done recently, and this one just doesn't land at all as far as I'm concerned.
And I've never been a fan of I Got You, Babe, so to me that feels like torture.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be, isn't it? Yeah. It's more of a gimmick. I don't think of that as part of the score. That's like a narrative device almost, isn't it? It's just like this constant reminder, it's that day again, it's that day again, it's that day again. But the soundtrack, haven't really got much to say, and the fact that I don't like it. And unsurprisingly, there's no video game based on this. But this is an interesting one because fundamentally, it's almost like like it is a video game, essentially. In video games, you keep replaying the same section, especially, what we think of as like quite traditional video games. You get so far, you die, you try again, or you get to the end, you start, you try again. So it does have a video game structure. And obviously it doesn't work quite as well because, it's about a small town and there's not really much action. You can't really make a video game about a guy who's maybe killing himself. I mean, you could maybe do a narrative adventure. I'm not sure if it'd work. But, you think about video game movies based on video games. They're almost universally terrible. The best video game movie isn't actually based on a video game, but it's based on this same structure, and that is Edge of Tomorrow with or Live, Die, Repeat, whatever you want to call it, with Tom Cruise, which is essentially the sci-fi version of this film. You know, it's another time loop film. Only difference is there are aliens, and he's got, you know, rather than bettering himself, he has to physically better himself to survive long enough to actually kill all the aliens. And let's be fair,
the reason why that's a good film is because it kills Tom Cruise a lot.
That film is fucking dope. I love that film. Just
Tom Cruise dying, it seems to be like, I never thought I'd enjoy that as much as I do.
And that is one of the things that film actually plays up to, is the fact that, especially, he plays such a smarmy version of himself. He turns up that smarmy version of himself to 10, to 11, whatever, to the point where you're so happy to see him die. But then in the same film, he reminds you why he's such a great action movie star.
No.
And so by the end...
Let's be clear, I hate Tom Cruise.
Oh, I love Tom Cruise.
Oh, I don't like him at all.
We could do a whole nother podcast of me just going through his IMDb and me asking you to pick out the fucking duds, because we're talking like your 90% knowing yours. His IMDb is 90% gold. I wouldn't go on record and say that. He has made so many good films, and there are so few.
I can pick one out of his 10%, mind.
Oh, yeah, there are some.
Legend.
Legend's good.
Legend's great. Legend is great, but Legend is terrible at the same time.
Yeah.
It's awful.
I can't, like, the thing is, it might have the best devil, like, the best visual representation of the devil, anyway.
Right, anyway,
I know
we've gone way too into Tom Cruise. So
yeah, we certainly have.
I'm going to steal an idea that you actually came up with a couple of weeks ago. I would make this a sim-style game.
Yeah, that was the other one. What I was thinking is, if you made it as, if you could somehow combine sim-style gameplay with a roguelike. You know roguelike video games, you know, where you basically you get so far, you die, it takes you right back to the start, but you keep some of the shit you've learned. So it's like that idea of him learning skills, but then having to keep repeating the day.
Yeah. And that's how I think a sim-style game would work, because you're making choices. Mm-hmm. And if that choice doesn't work, then you go back to the start. And it's quite a lot. It's like a lot of these games at the moment where I guess, what was that game we talked about as well? I did like it. It was that Prison Break game from the 70s, No Way Out.
Mm-hmm.
Where that's a narrative game. You make a choice and then you follow that path. If you
die,
you go
back. Sorry. Yeah. When you said 70s, I thought you meant like a 70s made video game. I was like, dude, I don't think they made them like that in the 70s.
No, it was based in the 70s, sorry. Yeah, but I like that narrative idea where you make a choice, you follow that narrative, and if it goes wrong, you go back again and you... Do you know what I mean? You span up. Yeah. So I quite like that idea, but you can't make a really action-packed game of Groundhog Day.
No. I think it's one of those things you just learn skills, and that allows you, like, say something like Mass Effect or something. Like, if you've built up enough skills, you can choose certain narrative options, but you need to build up those skills. So as you go through the day, like maybe you learn piano, maybe you learn a bit of ice sculpting, and there's all mini games linked to that. And each day you repeat it, you can get a little bit better. And as you get better, what that does is open up narrative and actions that you can partake. So if you go up to a character, at first you can only be a bit of a dick, or you can only say one or two things. But then once you've gone through the loop, say 10, 20, 30 times, and you've built up all these skills, all of a sudden you've got so many more options. So the world remains the same, but your options within that world increase as your skills increase. So suddenly, you think of that like conversation wheel you get in something like Mass Effect. You go up, and instead of, when you start, there are two conversation options. There's be a dick or be nice. But then once you've got, certain skills, like you said, piano, whatever kind of thing, you've built up those skills, suddenly that wheel expands. And suddenly you can say this, you can say that, and that might lead you into another conversation with another character which wasn't available to you on the first loop. So I think something like that, where it's a weird combination of The Sims, a graphic adventure, and somehow a roguelike, I think that might work. But it would need some thinking, that's for sure. But I think we might be able to something there.
Well, I mean, we'll have to get on with our developers and figure that out.
Yeah, well, Naughty Dog will have to be Naughty Dog. I mean, Jesus Christ, they've got to be sending us free fucking games. They're going to mention this every single week.
You have mentioned Naughty Dog more than I have at this point.
Yeah, I know. I don't. The thing is, I just don't love Naughty Dog as much as other people. I think it's because the narratives are fantastic, but the gameplay is never quite as good as I want it to be. It's the same with Bethesda. Everyone bums Bethesda. I don't like. I want to love their games. I want to love Fallout. I want to love Skyrim, but I just don't.
No,
it's so annoying.
I can't stand Fallout. I can't stand Skyrim. I'm not a fan of them.
The gameplay's just not good. It was the reason I kept falling out of Skyrim. I kept dropping off of Skyrim, and eventually I went and played Dragon's Dogma, which doesn't have anywhere near the same scale, but it's got much better gameplay. See, I could go down another rabbit hole now. We're talking about Dragon's Dogma, Skyrim, and fucking Tom Cruise.
Let's move on to reviews then.
Yes.
So I'll let you go first this week. So the two questions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. What would you rate it, and would you recommend this to others?
Well, I'm going to get the easy one out of the way first. Would I recommend to others? 100%. As much as I say it's a 90s film, it 100% holds up. It's like it's such a charming film, and as much as I said, the suits and stuff give it that 90s vibe. The actual town itself has a slightly 50s Americana thing about it. Almost feels like, like we said about some of these other films, it feels like a set, and it's very charming in that regard. But yeah, this film, not only does it hold up well, but it's still a film which actually gets better each time you watch it. Like, you pick up more and more and more. So not only would I tell you to go back and watch it, I would say watch it numerous times. The review is trickier because I am going back and forth between a 4 and a 5. In the end, I want to give it like a 9 out of 10, but I'm not sure. That feels like a bit of a cop-out. So I'm gonna give it a 4, just. But it's a very, very, very positive 4. Very positive 4. How about you?
Yeah, so I'd give it a 4. That's the easy one out of the way.
Okay, fair enough.
I think it's a good film. It does everything right. I've already said that I love the fact that there's no explanation.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I always prefer films that kind of end without an explanation, without an exposition. It's for you to decide what's going on.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy that. Mm-hmm. Would I recommend it? Is a tough one, and the only reason being, the only reason being is because everybody knows this film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if you could speak to somebody, mention Groundhog Day, for them not to go, I know the story, I know about... Do you know what I mean?
That doesn't matter,
it's one of those tough ones where, okay, you may not have seen it, but you know the story about it anyway. So trying to get people to watch it then, it's a bit difficult because, it's just a guy repeating the day. Some people are going to like that, some people aren't going to like that. But I would... If it was me personally, I would recommend it to others. I enjoy this film. I'd love for others to enjoy this film. So I would recommend it. But a lot of people know this film. And I know the same. A lot of people know Die Hard. They haven't seen it's a guy in a building. Do you know what I mean? But this seems a bit different. Like, Groundhog Day seems to be a film that you can say the name and everybody seems to know the actual premise about it.
Yeah, it's become synonymous with the whole thing. Groundhog Day now, we just associate it with a day being on loop. But I actually think of it the opposite way. The reason I would suggest to anyone, of course you're going to know, if I say Groundhog Day, even if you've never seen it, you're like, yeah, the film where he's on a loop, yeah. But, I mean, we've even covered it here. The fact that we never find out how he gets into the loop, we don't find out really, we have an idea of why he gets that loop, but it's never confirmed. It's because, if ever, the destination didn't matter. It was the journey. This is the movie. And of course, we all know he's on a time loop, but even going back to it, I was surprised by how invested I became on that journey. And there are very few films where in the first 30 minutes, I didn't like Phil or Rita. I didn't like either of them. By the end, I really liked both of them. And I was surprised. I was like, God, it's like I'm going on this journey with them again for the first time. And I think that's the reason why I'd happily say, oh, yeah, of course you know the premise. It's called fucking Groundhog Day. But it's about going on that journey with Phil. And I just think like it's as good now as it's ever been. So yeah, I would totally encourage other people to go see it.
Well, there you go.
So of course.
It's a 4 out of 5. And yes, we would encourage other people to watch it.
To different degrees, depending on who you're asking.
I'm the one that wanted to watch this film, and I love it, and I would want others to watch it. It's just, it feels really, because people already know this, know this kind of premise, it feels a lot harder to get people to go with it, if you know what I mean. Because we've seen so many Day Gets Repeated films since this. So,
but this is the first one, and I would still say the best.
This is the first one, and it is the best one, yeah. But it's just, it's a tougher sell, I think.
I don't think it's a tough sell at all. But like you said,
yeah. But no, I think it's a tougher sell. But I would still recommend it to others. I wouldn't be as enamored to push it as much as you, I guess, because you've seen really like you've gone from...
I think it's one of those films where, as much as, like I said, there are certain films where I would give it a 5-star without thinking, but I wouldn't necessarily tell all my friends to go and see it. Whereas this film is one I would say is a 4. It's a very high 4, but it's still a 4. But I think it's so inherently likable that I would suggest just about anyone go see it. It could be a 10-year-old kid, or it could be his 90-year-old grandma. I'm like, yeah, I think this is like the quintessential. I use that word far too often, but it's such a brilliant family movie. I just think it can work for anyone, you know, and I don't think it matters your background. I just think because of that relatively simple premise, it's a high concept for sure, but it's one we've all become more and more comfortable with because obviously there's been so many films since. But I think most people are like, yeah, just give it a go. Like it's super fun. And again, you can dig deep if you want to, but if you just want to watch this as a high concept romantic comedy, yeah, just watch it as that instead, you know? So the point is we both really liked it and go and watch it.
We agree to disagree to agree that we would recommend it to others.
Yeah, that sums it up perfectly, I think. Yeah, let's just say yeah. Let's
right, moving on. Before we get to your recommendation, we'll cover the... Oh, actually, sorry. Did we cover Legacy?
No, we didn't. Legacy, I guess we kind of have. No, we did actually miss that. So we've been a bit clumsy there. But the real legacy is the fact that it's essentially created a genre. And we don't want to go through all these films again, like, you know,
although we have mentioned them quite a lot.
That's what I mean. We've already mentioned, so we would be going over it. But that really is the legacy of this film, is in itself its own kind of weird subgenre of the time loop movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is very much the legacy. So we'll just leave it at that.
Welcome and goodbye to the legacy section.
Yes.
We'll cover the admin then, as usual. If we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Hey You Guys 80s, and if you'd like to drop us an email for recommendations or reviews, feel free to email us on heyouguys80s@gmail.com. Before we say goodbye, the last thing to do is to get your choice for next week, mate.
Yeah. So I'm going with, I guess, something of a divisive movie. Going to go with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which sounds like an odd one, but it is chronologically, at least.
Yeah, it's the first because it's the prequel to Raiders. Yeah,
it is set a year or two before Raiders, and I just think it's interesting because, you know, we could sit here, and I think one day we probably will, and we could both sit here and have a boner about Raiders of the Lost Ark for an hour and a half, and we're all going to agree that it's one of the greatest movies of all time. Whereas this one, I think there's a lot more to pick through. I love Temple of Doom, but I appreciate a lot of people don't. And even as somebody who has a very high opinion of this film, I appreciate that there are some issues. So I think this is going to be a really interesting one.
The only thing I can say is prepare for an hour and 20 minutes of Kalima
Shakti Day. Oh, that guy's great. But yeah. So that's going to be the movie next week. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Look forward to that one. On that note then, I think we'll end it there. So this has been Liam and Rob for Hey You Guys.
Cheers, guys. Thanks. Catch ya.
Hey, you guys!